The marble floors of the Whitmore estate gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, each one worth more than most people earned in a year. Outside, the California sun beat down mercilessly on the manicured lawns of Beverly Hills, but inside the mansion, the air conditioning kept everything at a perfect 70 degrees. Everything was perfect. Everything except the sound that echoed through the hallways, a baby's weak, desperate cry. 7 days. 7 long, agonizing days since little Amara Whitmore had refused food. Dr. Harrison stood in the nursery, his silver hair catching the afternoon light as he closed his medical bag with a defeated click. He was the 3rd specialist this week, flown in from Johns Hopkins at enormous expense. Behind him, Khalid Whitmore paced like a caged lion, his designer shoes silent against the plush carpet. The Saudi businessman's usually immaculate appearance had begun to crack. His tie loosened, dark circles deepening under his eyes. "I don't understand." Khalid's voice trembled, a rare show of vulnerability from a man who'd built an empire on oil and real estate. "Money is no object. Bring in specialists from Switzerland, from Dubai, from anywhere. Just tell me what she needs." Dr. Harrison's expression was grave. "Mr. Whitmore, we've run every test imaginable. Blood work, scans, cultures. Everything comes back normal. Physically, your daughter should be fine, but she won't take the bottle, won't breastfeed from the wet nurse, refuses every formula we've tried." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes, in cases like this, there are factors beyond medicine." "Beyond medicine?" Khalid's wife, Nadia, spoke from the corner where she'd been standing motionless, her silk abaya rustling as she moved closer to the crib. Her voice was sharp with desperation. "What does that mean? Are you saying our daughter is choosing to starve?" The baby's cries had weakened to pitiful whimpers. At just 4 months old, Amara had already lost dangerous amounts of weight. Her once chubby cheeks had hollowed, her skin taking on a translucent quality that terrified everyone who saw her. Dr. Harrison gathered his coat. "I'm saying that sometimes infants sense stress, tension in their environment. They're more perceptive than we give them credit for." He glanced between the parents, noting the distance between them, the way they never quite looked at each other. "I'll consult with colleagues tonight. We'll find an answer, Mr. Whitmore." But his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. After the doctor left, the silence in the nursery was suffocating. Nadia reached into the crib, lifting Amara with practiced care, trying once more to offer a bottle. The baby turned her head away, too weak even to cry properly now. "This is killing me," Nadia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Our daughter is dying and nobody can tell us why." Khalid stood at the window, staring out at the sprawling grounds. From here he could see the tennis courts, the Olympic-sized pool, the guest house that was larger than most family homes. He'd spent his life accumulating wealth, proving to the world that a Saudi immigrant could conquer American business. But what good was any of it now? "The new maid starts today," he said quietly, almost to himself. Nadia's head snapped up. "The maid? Khalid, our daughter is dying, and you're thinking about household staff?" "I'm thinking about everything," he replied, his voice hollow. "Mrs. Patterson from the agency said she's experienced, trustworthy. We need someone reliable while we focus on Amara. We have 6 staff members already, and they're all walking on eggshells, terrified of making things worse." Khalid turned from the window. "We need stability somewhere in this house. If you're watching this story unfold and want to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel is just starting, and your support means everything. Stories like these need to be heard, and I promise you what happens next will leave you speechless. Now back to the story. Downstairs in the mansion's service entrance, Grace Williams stood with her single battered suitcase and a heart full of quiet prayers. At 42, she'd learned that first impressions in wealthy homes could determine everything. She smoothed her simple black dress, adjusted the modest cross she always wore, and took a deep breath. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a stern woman in her 60s, eyed Grace with the same skeptical assessment she gave all new hires. "The agency says you have experience with difficult households?" "Yes, ma'am," Grace replied, her voice soft but steady. 10 years with the Morrison family in Connecticut, 5 with the Castellanos in Miami. "References check out," Mrs. Chen acknowledged, though her tone suggested she remained unconvinced. "But I'll be direct, Ms. Williams. This household is under extraordinary stress right now. The family's baby is very ill. We maintain absolute professionalism, minimal noise, and we do not gossip about family matters." "Understood?" Grace nodded. She'd heard whispers from the other maids in town. "The Whitmore baby." Doctors coming and going, the family falling apart. But Grace had learned long ago that other people's tragedies were not material for idle talk. "I understand, ma'am. How can I help?" Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. Perhaps it was Grace's genuine tone, or the weariness in her eyes that spoke of someone who understood hardship. "Third floor needs deep cleaning. The family hasn't been using those rooms, but Mrs. Whitmore wants everything pristine. Stay out of the nursery wing entirely. That's on the second floor, east side. The family needs privacy." As Mrs. Chen led Grace through the mansion's service corridors, the contrast between this world and Grace's own couldn't have been starker. She'd grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Atlanta, raised by a grandmother who worked 3 jobs after Grace's parents died in a car accident. Every luxury here, the marble, the artwork, the sheer space, represented a universe she'd only ever glimpsed from the outside. But Grace had also learned that suffering didn't discriminate by tax bracket. Rich or poor, when a child was sick, parents felt the same helpless terror. That evening, as Grace organized the third-floor linen closet, she heard it, a sound that made her hands still on the Egyptian cotton sheets. A baby's cry, so weak and desperate it seemed to pierce straight through the floors. She closed her eyes, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. "When you hear suffering, child, you don't turn away. You ask God what He needs you to do." Grace had no business on the second floor. She had her orders, her boundaries. But that cry, it spoke to something deeper than rules and employment contracts. She made a decision that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the main hallway struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the silent mansion. Grace sat in her small room on the 3rd floor, unable to sleep. The baby's cries had stopped an hour ago, but the silence was somehow worse. It felt like surrender. She'd spent the evening learning the rhythm of the household. Mrs. Chen ran the staff with military precision. 2 housekeepers, a chef, a groundskeeper, a driver, and now Grace. Everyone moved through their duties like ghosts, speaking in whispers, avoiding the 2nd floor entirely. The tension was suffocating. During dinner in the staff kitchen, Grace had pieced together fragments of conversation. The baby had been healthy at birth, a miracle, they said, after Mrs. Whitmore's 3 miscarriages. Mr. Whitmore had flown in specialists from around the world. They'd tried every formula, every technique, every medical intervention. Nothing worked. "It's like she's given up," the younger housekeeper Maria had whispered. "Like she doesn't want to be here." The chef, an older French woman named Colette, had crossed herself. "Don't say such things about an innocent child." But Grace understood what Maria meant. She'd seen it before, years ago, in a foster home where she'd volunteered. Sometimes babies sensed things adults couldn't articulate. Stress, fear, discord. They absorbed the emotional temperature of their environment like tiny, helpless barometers. Now, lying in the darkness, Grace heard footsteps in the corridor below. Urgent, rapid, then voices. Khalid's deep baritone sharp with panic and Nadia's higher pitch breaking with sobs. Grace moved to her door, cracking it open. "Her breathing is too shallow," Nadia was saying. "We need to call Dr. Harrison again." "It's midnight, Nadia. What more can he do? He's already said." "Then we take her to the hospital." "Khalid, she's dying." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Grace closed her eyes, her heart hammering. This wasn't her place. She'd been hired to clean, to maintain the household, to stay invisible. Getting involved in family matters, especially something this serious, could cost her this job, and she desperately needed this job. Her own daughter, Maya, was in her 2nd year at community college, working 2 jobs to help pay tuition. Grace sent money home every month. She couldn't afford to lose this position. But that baby's cry. Grace had spent 20 years working in homes where she was expected to see everything and notice nothing. She'd watched marriages crumble, businesses fail, children suffer from neglect disguised as privilege. She'd learned to keep her head down, do her work, collect her paycheck. Yet her grandmother's voice persisted. "Your silence in the face of suffering makes you complicit, child. God didn't put you on this earth to be invisible." Grace made her decision. She changed from her nightgown into her work dress, said a quick prayer, and descended the stairs to the 2nd floor. The hallway was dimly lit, family portraits lining the walls, Khalid's stern father in traditional Saudi dress, Nadia's elegant mother at some charity gala, and a large wedding photo of the couple, both looking impossibly young and hopeful. The nursery door stood ajar, warm light spilling into the corridor. Grace knocked softly. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore." The conversation inside stopped abruptly. Khalid appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Ms. Williams, what are you doing on this floor?" Mrs. Chen should have explained. "I heard the baby crying earlier," Grace said quietly, meeting his eyes. "I'm sorry to intrude, sir, but I have some experience with infants. I wondered if I might help." Khalid's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, we've had pediatric specialists, nutritionists, the best doctors in the country. I don't think—" "Khalid," Nadia's voice came from inside the nursery, desperate and pleading. "What harm could it do, please?" He hesitated, conflict playing across his features. Grace could see it. The war between pride and desperation, between maintaining control and admitting he was helpless. Finally, he stepped aside. The nursery was a study in contrasts. One wall was covered in expensive murals of fairy tales. The crib was Italian-made and cost more than a car, and every surface held monitors, sterilizers, warmers, all the technology money could buy. But in the center of it all, in Nadia's arms, was a baby so small and fragile she looked like she might disappear entirely. Grace's breath caught. Amara's skin had a translucent quality, her little chest rising and falling with obvious effort. The baby's eyes were half open, unfocused, like she was already somewhere else. "Oh, sweet child," Grace whispered. Nadia looked up, her face streaked with tears, her expensive silk blouse stained with spit-up and desperation. "She won't eat. She won't. We've tried everything. I don't know what else to do." Grace approached slowly, the way you would a frightened animal. "May I hold her?" Nadia glanced at Khalid, who gave a terse nod. Carefully, Nadia transferred the baby to Grace's arms. The moment Amara settled against Grace's chest, something shifted. The baby's breathing changed slightly, still shallow, still concerning, but different. Grace began to sway gently, an instinctive rocking motion she'd used with Maya years ago, and with dozens of babies in the years since. "When did she last take any food at all?" Grace asked softly. "Thursday morning," Nadia said. "Just an ounce. Before that, Wednesday evening. We've been trying every 2 hours, but she turns her head away, cries, or just gives up." Grace studied the baby's face, noting the dry lips, the sunken fontanelle, severe dehydration. This child was in critical condition. "The doctors," Grace said carefully. "What did they say about her environment? About stress factors?" Khalid's expression hardened. "Are you suggesting this is our fault?" "No, sir. I'm suggesting that babies are more sensitive than we realize. They pick up on tension, on fear, on—" Grace paused, choosing her words carefully. "On the energy around them." "Energy?" Khalid's tone was sharp. "We don't need mystical nonsense. We need medical solutions." "I'm not talking about anything mystical," Grace replied, her voice remaining calm. "I'm talking about basic human connection. Babies need to feel safe to eat. They need to feel that the world is a place worth staying in." Nadia let out a choked sob. "But we love her. We want her here." "I know you do," Grace said gently. "But she can feel your fear, your panic. Every time you try to feed her, you're terrified, and she feels that terror." The room fell silent except for the soft whir of the baby monitor and Amara's labored breathing. Grace looked down at the tiny child in her arms and made a decision that went against every professional boundary she'd ever maintained. "Let me try something, please." She carried Amara to the rocking chair by the window and sat down. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, Grace began to hum. It was an old spiritual her grandmother used to sing, a melody that spoke of peace and protection and love that transcended understanding. Khalid and Nadia watched in stunned silence as Grace rocked the baby, humming that ancient tune. Minutes passed. The tension in Amara's tiny body began to ease. Her breathing, while still shallow, found a more regular rhythm. "The bottle," Grace said quietly. "Room temperature, not warmed. And please, step back. Give her space to not feel your anxiety." Nadia grabbed a prepared bottle from the warmer, adjusted it to room temperature with shaking hands, and passed it to Grace. Then she and Khalid moved to the far side of the nursery, watching with held breath. Grace shifted Amara in her arms, positioning her at a gentle angle. She touched the bottle's nipple to the baby's lips, still humming that low, soothing melody. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Amara's lips parted slightly. Grace didn't react, didn't tense with hope. She simply continued humming, continued rocking, continued offering the bottle with the same calm patience she'd offer a sunrise. Inevitable, unhurried, certain. Amara's mouth closed around the nipple. She sucked once, twice. Nadia's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Khalid stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. Amara drank. Not much, maybe half an ounce, but she drank. And when she finished, she didn't cry. Instead, she sighed, a tiny sound of contentment, and her eyes finally closed in genuine sleep. The silence in the nursery was profound. Grace continued rocking for several more minutes, ensuring Amara was truly asleep before carefully standing and placing the baby in her crib. She adjusted the blanket with practiced hands, then turned to face the parents. Nadia was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Khalid looked like he'd witnessed a miracle he couldn't explain. "How did you—" he began but couldn't finish. Grace smoothed her dress. "Babies know when they're safe, Mr. Whitmore. She just needed to feel that someone wasn't afraid, that someone believed she'd be okay. But the doctors, the specialists, they were focused on what was wrong," Grace said gently. "Sometimes we need to focus on what's right, on the simple act of presence without panic." Nadia crossed the room and took Grace's hands. "Thank you. Thank you. I don't know what you did, but thank you." Grace squeezed her hands in return. "She's not out of danger yet, ma'am. She needs to eat regularly, small amounts, and she needs calm, but she wants to live. I could feel it." Khalid ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking further. "Will you? Could you stay with her tonight? We can pay you extra, whatever you need." "I don't want extra pay, sir," Grace interrupted quietly. "But yes, I'll stay. If you'd like, I can take the night shifts, let you both rest. You can't help her if you're running on empty." The relief on both their faces was palpable. As Khalid and Nadia reluctantly left the nursery, Grace settled into the rocking chair and pulled out her phone. She texted her daughter, "Pray for this baby, sweetheart. She needs all the light she can get." Maya's response came quickly. "Always, Mama. You okay?" Grace looked at Amara, sleeping peacefully for the first time in 7 days, and typed, "I think I'm exactly where I need to be." Outside, the Beverly Hills night continued its quiet luxury. Security lights illuminating perfectly trimmed hedges, the distant hum of expensive cars on distant streets. But inside the nursery, something had shifted. A baby was breathing easier, and Grace Williams, a maid who'd spent 20 years being invisible, had just become the most important person in the Whitmore household. Dawn broke over Beverly Hills with the kind of golden light that made everything look like a postcard. Grace had been awake for 26 hours straight, but she barely felt the exhaustion. Every 2 hours through the night, she'd fed Amara, small amounts, never pushing, always calm. The baby had taken 4 ounces total, a miracle compared to the previous 7 days of nothing. At 6 in the morning, Nadia appeared in the nursery doorway, her eyes red-rimmed but hopeful. "How is she?" Grace looked up from the rocking chair, Amara sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. "She took another ounce at 4. Her color's better. Feel her fontanelle. It's not as sunken." Nadia rushed forward, her hand trembling as she gently touched her daughter's head. Grace was right. The soft spot that had been dangerously depressed was beginning to normalize. "Oh my God," Nadia whispered. She's getting better. She's fighting," Grace corrected gently. "But she needs consistency now. Regular feedings, calm environment, and..." Grace paused, knowing she was about to overstep every boundary. "And she needs to feel her mother's peace, not her fear." Nadia sank into the chair beside Grace, her designer pajamas a sharp contrast to Grace's simple dress. "I don't know how to not be afraid, B. Every time I hold her, all I can think about is losing her. After 3 miscarriages, after everything we went through to have her, that's exactly what she feels," Grace said softly. "Your grief from the past, your fear of the future. Babies exist only in the present moment. When you hold her weighted down with all that history, she carries it too." Tears spilled down Nadia's cheeks. "How do I stop? How do I just let go of the fear?" Grace shifted Amara slightly, the baby stirring but not waking. "You don't let go of it. You acknowledge it, and then you choose to act from love instead of from fear. Every time you pick her up, take a breath first. Remind yourself, right now, in this moment, she's here. She's breathing. That's enough. You make it sound simple. It's not simple at all," Grace admitted. "It's the hardest thing in the world. But Mrs. Whitmore, I've seen a lot of families in my years of work. The ones who suffer the most aren't the ones who face hard things. It's the ones who face hard things alone, locked in their own fear, unable to ask for help or accept it when it comes." Nadia studied Grace's face, really seeing her for perhaps the first time. "Mrs. Chen said you have a daughter?" Grace's expression softened. "Maya, 20 years old, studying nursing at community college. You raised her alone? Her father left when she was 2, said he couldn't handle the responsibility. Grace's voice held no bitterness, just fact. It was hard. There were nights I cried myself to sleep wondering how I'd pay rent, buy groceries, keep her in school. But we made it. She's strong, kind, determined. I'm proud of her. And you're here working for people like us instead of what? Grace met Nadia's eyes directly. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm not ashamed of what I do. I take care of homes. I take care of people. There's dignity in that. My grandmother cleaned houses her whole life, put my mother through college doing it. My mother was a teacher until she died. Now I'm helping put my daughter through nursing school. That's not a story of lack. That's a story of love. Nadia's tears came harder now. I've been so focused on what I didn't have, the babies I lost, the perfect family I imagined, that I almost lost the one precious thing I do have. You haven't lost her, Grace said firmly. She's right here, and she's stronger than you think. As if on cue, Amara stirred, her tiny fist curling against Grace's chest. Grace stood smoothly and transferred the baby to Nadia's arms. Your turn. Remember, breathe first. Be present. She'll feel the difference. Nadia held her daughter, this time consciously releasing the tension in her shoulders, the fear in her chest. She began to hum, not Grace's spiritual, but a lullaby in Arabic that her own mother had sung to her. Amara settled immediately, her breathing steady and calm. Grace watched for a moment, then quietly slipped from the room. She needed coffee, a shower, and about 12 hours of sleep. But first she had to face Mrs. Chen. The head housekeeper was waiting in the service kitchen, her expression unreadable. Ms. Williams, I hear you spent the night in the family's private quarters. Grace met her gaze steadily. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Whitmore asked me to stay with the baby. That's not your job. No, ma'am. But the baby needed help, and I could provide it. Mrs. Chen's stern expression cracked slightly. The chef told me what happened, that you got the baby to eat after 7 days. She paused. How? Grace poured herself coffee from the staff pot, choosing her words carefully. I've worked with children my whole life, Mrs. Chen. Sometimes they just need someone who isn't carrying the weight of everything that could go wrong. Someone who can be calm. The Whitmores are private people. Mr. Whitmore especially doesn't like staff involving themselves in family matters. I understand. If he wants me to leave, I'll go. But I won't apologize for helping a child who was suffering. Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. She smiled. My daughter was like that as a baby. Colic, they said. Screamed for months. The only person who could calm her was my mother. She had that same quality you have, that stillness. Grace felt the tension ease from her shoulders. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was a maid too. Worked for the same family for 40 years. Mrs. Chen's expression turned thoughtful. She used to say that we see things in these houses that the families themselves are too close to notice. We're invisible, so we become witnesses. And what have you witnessed in this house? Grace asked quietly. Mrs. Chen glanced toward the doorway, ensuring they were alone. 2 people who love each other, but have forgotten how to show it. Too much loss, too much pressure. Mr. Whitmore's family in Saudi Arabia has expectations. They wanted a son to carry on the business legacy. 3 miscarriages, then finally a daughter. I think they're both terrified that if they relax for even a moment, everything will fall apart. So they're holding on so tight they're strangling what they love most. Exactly. Mrs. Chen refilled her own coffee cup. That baby's been drowning in their fear since she was born. No wonder she stopped eating. Grace nodded slowly. Mrs. Chen, if I'm to help this family, and I think I can, I need to understand the full situation. What else should I know? The housekeeper hesitated, then sighed. Mr. Whitmore's father is flying in from Riyadh next week. He doesn't know the baby's been sick. Mr. Whitmore has been hiding it, afraid of disappointing him. The old man is traditional, demanding. He has very specific ideas about how his granddaughter should be raised. And when he arrives and sees a black maid caring for his granddaughter, Mrs. Chen's expression was somber. That's going to be a problem, a significant one. Grace absorbed this information, feeling the weight of what she'd stepped into. This wasn't just about feeding a baby. This was about navigating complex family dynamics, cultural expectations and prejudices she'd faced her entire life. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Amara's tiny face, felt the trust in the way the baby had relaxed in her arms. That child deserved to live, to thrive, regardless of what any patriarch thought about who was caring for her. 1 week, Grace said quietly. We have 1 week to get Amara strong enough to withstand whatever storm is coming. You're not afraid? Grace thought of her grandmother who'd cleaned houses in Georgia during segregation, who'd raised her head high despite a world determined to make her feel small. She thought of her mother, who'd taught despite death threats during integration. She thought of her own daughter, fighting for an education, refusing to accept the limitations others tried to place on her. I'm terrified, Grace admitted, but I've learned that fear is just information. It tells you what matters, and that baby matters more than my comfort. Over the next 3 days, a routine established itself. Grace worked her regular cleaning duties during the day, but she spent every evening and night in the nursery. Amara's progress was remarkable. By the 4th day, she was taking a full bottle every 3 hours, her weight beginning to stabilize, her color returning to healthy pink. But it wasn't just the baby who was changing. Khalid, who'd barely spoken to Grace beyond curt instructions, began lingering in the nursery doorway during feedings. He'd watch as Grace rocked his daughter, humming those old spirituals, and something in his rigid posture would soften. One evening, he finally spoke. Where did you learn those songs? Grace looked up, surprised he'd initiated conversation. My grandmother. She was born in 1920 in rural Georgia. These were the songs her mother taught her, slave songs she called them, though slavery had ended before she was born. Songs about endurance, about finding peace in suffering, about trusting that morning comes. Khalid moved into the room, his expensive suit somehow looking less important than it usually did. In my culture, we have similar songs. Not the same history, but the same. Understanding that life is difficult, and we need something beyond ourselves to carry us through. Music is a universal language, Grace agreed. Babies understand it before they understand words. He sat in the chair across from her, watching Amara nurse contentedly. I owe you an apology, Ms. Williams. When you first came to the nursery, I was dismissive. I thought you couldn't possibly know more than the doctors we'd consulted. You were protecting your daughter. That's not something to apologize for. But I almost let my pride prevent her from getting the help she needed. Khalid's voice was thick with emotion. I built my business on the belief that money could solve any problem. That if I was successful enough, wealthy enough, powerful enough, I could protect my family from suffering. And then my daughter started dying. And all my money, all my connections, all my power, it meant nothing. Grace continued rocking, giving him space to talk. My father built his fortune from nothing, Khalid continued. He grew up in poverty, worked his way up through the oil industry through sheer determination. He's a hard man, Ms. Williams. He believes weakness is the greatest sin. When I told him Nadia was pregnant again after 3 miscarriages, he said, "Don't disappoint me, son. Don't give me another failure." He said that about his own grandchildren. Khalid's laugh was bitter. He said that about my wife. He sees the miscarriages as her failure, not as the medical reality they were. And when Amara was born a girl instead of a boy, he stopped, unable to finish. He was disappointed. Grace finished quietly. He hid it well, sent gifts, made the appropriate statements, but I could hear it in his voice. This wasn't the grandson who would carry on the family legacy. This was just a granddaughter. Khalid looked at Amara, his eyes filling with tears, and I was so focused on proving him wrong, on showing him that I could raise a perfect daughter who would exceed all his expectations, that I turned my own home into a pressure cooker. Nadia felt it. The staff felt it. And Amara, his voice broke. My tiny daughter felt it most of all. Grace waited until he composed himself, then said gently, "Mr. Whitmore, can I tell you something my grandmother told me when I was struggling to raise Maya alone?" He nodded. She said, "Grace, that child didn't ask to be born into your circumstances. She didn't ask for an absent father or a struggling mother. But she's here and she's yours, and your job isn't to make her life perfect. Your job is to love her fiercely enough that she knows she's worth fighting for. That's it. That's the whole job." Khalid wiped his eyes. "Your grandmother sounds like she was an extraordinary woman. She was a maid who never made more than minimum wage in her life, but she raised children who knew they mattered. That's a legacy money can't buy." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound Amara's contented feeding and the soft creak of the rocking chair. Finally, Khalid spoke again. "My father arrives in 4 days. He's going to have opinions about the situation here, about you caring for Amara. I imagine he will. I want you to know that regardless of what he says, you have a place in this household as long as you want it. You saved my daughter's life." Grace met his eyes directly. "Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate that. But I need you to understand something. I didn't save Amara's life for job security or gratitude. I did it because it was right. And if your father's presence means that doing right becomes impossible, I'll leave. I won't stay where I can't help her." "That's fair," Khalid said quietly. "But I'm going to fight for you to stay. Because Amara needs you, we all do." As if in agreement, Amara finished her bottle and let out a satisfied burp that made both adults smile. Grace stood to put her in the crib, but Khalid held out his arms. "May I?" She transferred the baby to her father, watching as he held his daughter for the first time without visible fear, without the crushing weight of expectation. Just a father, holding his child. "She's beautiful," he whispered, "not because of what she'll become or what she'll achieve, just because she is." Grace felt tears prick her own eyes. "Now you're learning, Mr. Whitmore." That night, after Khalid left the nursery, Grace stood at the window watching the lights of Los Angeles spread out below like a galaxy. Somewhere in that vast city, her own daughter was probably studying for exams, working a late shift, building her future. Grace texted her, "Miss you, sweetheart. Proud of you always." Maya's response was immediate. "Miss you too, Mama. How's the baby? Getting stronger every day. Like someone else I know. Learned from the best. Love you." Grace smiled and pocketed her phone. 4 days until the grandfather arrived. 4 days to prepare for a confrontation she knew was coming. 4 days to make sure Amara was strong enough to weather whatever storm her family's patriarch would bring. But tonight, in this moment, a baby was sleeping peacefully. Her parents were beginning to heal, and Grace Williams, who'd spent 20 years being invisible, was exactly where she needed to be. The black Mercedes S-Class pulled through the gates of the Whitmore estate at precisely 3 p.m. on Thursday afternoon. Grace watched from the third-floor window as the driver opened the rear door, and an elderly man emerged. Tall, imposing despite his 78 years, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than Grace made in 6 months. Abdullah Whitmore had arrived. Grace had spent the past 4 days preparing for this moment. Amara was thriving now, taking full bottles every 3 hours, gaining weight, her eyes bright and alert. The transformation had been so dramatic that Dr. Harrison had called it unprecedented during his follow-up visit. But Grace knew that the real test wasn't medical. It was what was about to walk through that front door. Mrs. Chen appeared at Grace's elbow, her expression grave. He requested to see the baby immediately. No rest, no pleasantries. Just demanded to see his granddaughter. He doesn't know she was sick? Mr. Whitmore told him yesterday. The old man nearly had a heart attack on the phone from what I heard. Blamed Nadia, blamed the doctors, blamed everyone except his son. Mrs. Chen's voice dropped to a whisper. And Grace, he specifically asked who's been caring for the child. When Mr. Whitmore told him about you, Grace felt her stomach tighten. What did he say? Let's just say you should prepare yourself. This is going to be ugly. Grace descended to the second floor, her heart pounding but her steps steady. She'd faced prejudice before, subtle and overt, from employers who clutched their purses tighter when she entered rooms, from people who assumed incompetence based on the color of her skin. She'd survived it all with dignity and grace the way her grandmother had taught her. But this felt different. This wasn't about her, it was about Amara. And that made it personal. She found Khalid and Nadia in the nursery, both looking like they were preparing for battle. Nadia's eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling as she held Amara. Khalid stood at the window, his jaw set in a hard line. "He's in the library," Khalid said without turning around. "He wants to see her, but first..." He finally looked at Grace and she saw genuine anguish in his eyes. "Ms. Williams, I need to warn you. My father is from a different generation, a different world. He has beliefs that are racist," Nadia interrupted sharply. "He's racist, Khalid. Let's not dress it up." Khalid flinched. "He's traditional. He believes certain people should occupy certain roles, which is the definition of racism," Nadia shot back. "Grace deserves to hear the truth. Your father is going to have a problem with her, not because of her qualifications or her character, but because of her skin color. That's reality." Grace appreciated Nadia's bluntness more than Khalid's careful euphemisms. "I understand, Mrs. Whitmore. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Khalid turned from the window. "I'm going to stand my ground. You saved my daughter's life when everyone else failed. That's what matters." "Is it?" Grace asked quietly. "Because from what Mrs. Chen told me, you've spent your whole life trying to earn your father's approval. Are you really prepared to defy him now? For me?" The silence was damning. Grace nodded, understanding flowing through her. "I appreciate your intentions, Mr. Whitmore, But let me make this easier for everyone. I'll stay in my regular duties. Cleaning, household management. You can hire a nanny, someone your father will approve of. No, the word came from Nadia, fierce and final. Absolutely not. Grace, you're the reason my daughter is alive. I don't care what that old man thinks. You're staying. Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate that, but you don't understand. Nadia stood, still holding Amara. I've lost 3 babies. 3 times I've held life inside me and felt it slip away. 3 times I've endured his thinly veiled disgust, his implications that I'm somehow defective. And when Amara was born, a girl, not the precious grandson he wanted, I saw the disappointment in his eyes even as he smiled for the cameras. Tears streamed down her face now. Then she stopped eating and I thought God was punishing me. I thought I was losing another child, and this time it would be my fault because I couldn't figure out how to feed my own daughter. I was drowning, Grace. Drowning in fear and failure and his judgment. She looked down at Amara, who was gazing up at her mother with clear, trusting eyes. You pulled me out. You didn't just save her, you saved me. You taught me how to be a mother instead of a terrified woman waiting for disaster. So no, I don't care what Abdullah thinks. You're part of this family now. Grace felt her throat tighten with emotion. 20 years of being invisible, of being the help, of knowing her place. And here was this woman, this wealthy Saudi woman she'd known for barely a week, calling her family. Mrs. Whitmore. Nadia, she corrected. Please, call me Nadia. Before Grace could respond, Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her expression tight. He's asking for you, all of you, in the library, now. The library was exactly what Grace expected. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, expensive artwork, and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Abdullah Whitmore stood by the fireplace, a crystal tumbler of what looked like scotch in his hand despite it being barely afternoon. He was an imposing figure, tall like his son but harder, his face carved from stone and sharp angles. His eyes swept over the group as they entered, lingering on Amara in Nadia's arms with an expression Grace couldn't quite read. So, he said, his accent thick but his English perfect. My granddaughter lives. Against all odds, I'm told. Khalid stepped forward. Father, thank you for coming. As I explained on the phone, Amara experienced a severe feeding issue. But she's recovered now. She's healthy, thriving. Because of the maid. Abdullah's gaze shifted to Grace, and she felt the weight of it like a physical force. This is the woman who succeeded where expensive doctors failed? Grace met his stare directly, refusing to look away. Grace Williams, sir. I'm honored to meet you. Honored. He said the word like he was tasting something bitter. You're honored to meet me, but you presume to care for my granddaughter? To insert yourself into family matters that are none of your concern? Father, Khalid began, but Abdullah raised a hand, silencing him. I'm speaking to the woman. Let her answer for herself. His eyes bored into Grace. What qualifies you to care for a child when trained medical professionals could not? Grace took a breath hearing her grandmother's voice. Stand tall, child. You're a child of God, same as any king or millionaire. Don't you ever forget it. I have 20 years of experience caring for children, sir. I raised my own daughter as a single mother while working multiple jobs. I've worked in homes where I've cared for infants, toddlers, children with special needs, but more than that. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I know what it means to be afraid and still show up, to love something so much it terrifies you, and to keep loving anyway. That's what Amara needed. Someone who wasn't paralyzed by fear. Abdullah's expression didn't change. And you believe this makes you suitable to care for a child of this family? A family with heritage, with standing, with a baby who was dying? Grace interrupted, her voice calm but firm. Sir, with all respect, when Amara stopped eating, she didn't care about heritage or standing or family legacy. She was a suffering infant who needed help. I gave it, that's all. The room fell silent. Even Mrs. Chen, standing by the door, seemed to hold her breath. Abdullah set down his glass with a sharp clink. You're very bold for someone in your position. My position is someone who helped save your granddaughter's life, Grace replied. That's not boldness, sir. That's fact. Khalid looked like he might pass out. Nadia's eyes were wide, but Grace stood her ground, meeting Abdullah's stare without flinching. Finally, the old man turned to his son. Khalid, a word, alone. Father, if this is about Grace, now. Khalid glanced at Grace, his expression apologetic, then followed his father into the adjoining study. The door closed behind them, but the walls were thin enough that raised voices carried through. Have you lost your mind? Abdullah's voice thundered. A black maid caring for my granddaughter? What will people say? What will the family say? The family should say, thank God she's alive. Khalid shot back. Father, I understand this isn't what you envisioned, but what I envision is irrelevant. I built this family from nothing. I gave you everything. Education, opportunities, connections, and this is how you repay me. By allowing some woman off the street to. She's not some woman off the street. She saved Amara when no one else could. Doesn't that matter to you? What matters is propriety, tradition. You think I built our reputation by being soft? By allowing outsiders to dictate how we manage our household? In the library, Grace stood perfectly still, absorbing every word. Nadia moved beside her, shifting Amara to one arm and taking Grace's hand with the other. I'm so sorry, Nadia whispered. You don't deserve this. Grace squeezed her hand. I've heard worse, believe me. The question is, what happens when they come back out? As if summoned, the study door opened. Khalid emerged first, his face flushed with anger. Abdullah followed, his expression carved from ice. Ms. Williams, Abdullah said, his voice controlled but cold. My son informs me that you've been instrumental in my granddaughter's recovery. For that, you have my thanks. However, he paused, making sure everyone was listening. I cannot in good conscience allow someone of your background to be the primary caregiver for a child of this family's standing. Father, Khalid protested, but Abdullah continued. Therefore, I'm arranging for a proper nanny to be hired. Someone from an agency in London with impeccable credentials and references. She'll arrive within the week. Ms. Williams, you'll return to your regular housekeeping duties. Is that understood? Grace felt something crack inside her chest. Not for herself, but for Amara. That baby had finally found peace, finally started to thrive, and now this man was going to upend everything because of his prejudice. But before she could speak, something unexpected happened. Amara, who'd been content in her mother's arms, suddenly began to cry. Not the weak, desperate cry of a dying infant, but a full-throated, angry wail that filled the library. Nadia tried to comfort her, rocking and shushing, but Amara's cries only intensified. Her little face turned red, her body rigid with distress. What's wrong with her? Abdullah demanded. Is she sick again? She's not sick, Grace said quietly. She's upset. Babies sense tension, remember? That's absurd. Grace moved to Nadia's side. May I? Nadia transferred Amara to Grace's arms, and the transformation was immediate. The crying didn't stop entirely, but it softened. Grace began to hum that familiar spiritual, began to rock with that steady rhythm, and Amara's rigid body started to relax. Abdullah watched this, his expression unreadable. A fluke. The child would calm eventually regardless. Try it yourself, Grace said, extending Amara toward him. Hold your granddaughter, see if she calms for you. It was a bold move, almost reckless. But Grace had learned something in her years of working with children and families. Sometimes the only way to break through prejudice was to force people to confront reality. Abdullah hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but pride wouldn't let him refuse. He took Amara awkwardly, holding her like she might break. The baby immediately began to wail again, louder than before, her little face scrunching with displeasure. Abdullah tried rocking her, but his movements were stiff, uncertain. Amara's cries escalated. He looked to Nadia, to Khalid, panic flickering in his eyes. The first genuine emotion Grace had seen from him. I don't understand. She doesn't know you, Grace said gently, and she can feel that you're uncomfortable. Babies are honest, Mr. Whitmore. They don't care about credentials or agencies or what people will say. They know who makes them feel safe. She took Amara back, and once again the crying eased. Grace resumed her humming, her rocking, and within moments Amara was settled, her eyes drooping toward sleep. The silence in the library was profound. Abdullah stared at his granddaughter, now peaceful in Grace's arms, and something in his rigid posture cracked. This doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, Nadia said quietly. Grace has been with her every night for over a week, feeding her, rocking her, singing to her. Amara knows her, trusts her. That's not something you can hire from an agency in London. Khalid stepped forward. Father, I understand this isn't what you wanted, but Amara is alive because of Grace. She's thriving because of Grace. I'm not willing to risk her health again because of... He stopped, choosing his words carefully. Because of tradition. Abdullah's jaw worked, conflict playing across his features. Grace could see the war happening inside him. Pride versus love. Prejudice versus reality. Control versus surrender. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. How long has she been sleeping through the night? The question was directed at Grace. 3 nights now, Grace answered. Full 6-hour stretches. Before that, she was waking every 2 hours, but that's normal for an infant recovering from... And her feeding schedule? Every 3 hours during the day, 4 ounces per feeding. She's gaining weight steadily, approaching her target percentile. Her temperament? Grace paused, understanding what he was really asking. She's a happy baby, sir. Curious, alert, responsive. She smiles now, tracks faces, responds to voices. All the developmental milestones are on track. Abdullah was quiet for a long moment, watching Amara sleep peacefully in Grace's arms. Then he turned to Khalid. This woman, her credentials, her background, you've verified everything? Yes, father. Impeccable references, years of experience. And she lives here, in the household? Yes, sir, Grace answered for herself. I have a room on the 3rd floor. I'm available whenever Amara needs me. Abdullah nodded slowly, and Grace could see him rebuilding his worldview in real time, trying to fit this reality into his existing framework. And your daughter, the one you mentioned, she's in college? Community college, studying nursing. She works 2 jobs to help pay tuition. So you understand the value of education, of bettering oneself. Grace met his eyes directly. Sir, I've understood that my entire life. My grandmother cleaned houses and put my mother through college. My mother taught school and raised me to value education above almost everything. Now I'm doing the same for my daughter. We may not have your wealth, but we have our dignity and our determination. Something shifted in Abdullah's expression. Not warmth exactly, but perhaps respect. My father was a goat herder, he said quietly. Couldn't read or write. I was the first in my family to attend university, to build a business, to create wealth. People looked down on me because of where I came from, what I looked like, how I spoke. He paused. I swore I would never be in that position of weakness again. So you made yourself strong, Grace said. I understand that. But sir, strength isn't about never needing help. It's about knowing when to accept it. Abdullah's eyes glistened, and for just a moment, Grace saw past the harsh patriarch to the frightened man beneath, someone who'd spent his whole life proving his worth, terrified that any crack in his armor would mean everything he'd built would crumble. He cleared his throat roughly. Ms. Williams, I apologize for my earlier assumptions. It appears my granddaughter has found someone she trusts. That is not something to be taken lightly. Grace felt her own eyes sting with tears. Thank you, sir. However, Abdullah continued, his voice firming, if you're to continue caring for her, certain standards must be maintained. She'll need to learn Arabic as well as English. She'll be taught our customs, our faith. Is that acceptable to you? Sir, I'm here to help her thrive, not to impose my own beliefs. I'll support whatever cultural and religious education you want her to have. Abdullah nodded. Then we have an understanding. He turned to Khalid and Nadia. The London nanny will not be necessary. Ms. Williams will continue as Amara's primary caregiver, with appropriate compensation for these additional duties. Khalid looked stunned. Nadia's tears flowed freely. Grace simply stood there, holding the sleeping baby, feeling the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just about keeping her job. It was about a proud, prejudiced man choosing to see past his own limitations for the sake of his granddaughter. As Abdullah prepared to leave the library, he paused at the door. Ms. Williams? That song you sing to her? What is it? An old spiritual, sir. His eye is on the sparrow. It was my grandmother's favorite. Teach it to me, he said quietly. I'd like to be able to sing to my granddaughter. And Grace Williams, who'd spent 20 years being invisible, smiled and said, I'd be honored, sir. 3 weeks passed, and the Whitmore household transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Abdullah, who'd initially planned to stay only a few days, extended his visit indefinitely. He'd moved into the guest house, converting it into a temporary office from which he conducted his international business dealings. But every morning at 7 and every evening at 6, he appeared in the nursery, not to supervise or criticize, but to learn. Grace had never imagined she'd spend her mornings teaching a Saudi oil magnate how to hold a baby properly, how to test bottle temperature on his wrist, how to recognize the difference between a hungry cry and a tired one. But there they were, an unlikely pair bound by their love for the same child. Like this? Abdullah asked, adjusting Amara in his arms while Grace supervised. His movements were still slightly stiff, but the fear was gone, replaced by something softer, something that looked remarkably like joy. Perfect, Grace encouraged. See how she's looking at you? That's trust, Mr. Whitmore. She knows you now. Amara gazed up at her grandfather, her dark eyes bright and curious. At nearly 6 months old, she'd transformed from the skeletal, dying infant into a thriving baby with chubby cheeks and a ready smile. She'd even started babbling, mostly nonsense, but occasionally something that sounded almost like mama or dada. Abdullah's face softened in a way Grace suspected few people ever witnessed. She has her grandmother's eyes, he said quietly. My wife, Khalid's mother. She died when he was 12. Cancer. I see her in this child's face sometimes. It was the most personal thing he'd ever shared with Grace. Over the past weeks, their relationship had evolved from tense coexistence to something approaching mutual respect. He still had his prejudices. Grace heard them in occasional comments about those people or assumptions about certain neighborhoods, but he was trying. And Grace had learned that sometimes change happened slowly, one small moment at a time. She would be proud of you, Grace said gently, for learning to be present with Amara, instead of just providing for her. Abdullah's jaw tightened, but not with anger. With emotion he was struggling to contain. I provided for Khalid. I gave him everything money could buy, but I never... He stopped, wrestling with words. I never sang to him, never rocked him to sleep. I thought that was women's work, beneath my dignity as a father. And now? Now I understand what I lost. What he lost. Abdullah looked down at Amara, who'd grabbed his finger and was studying it with intense concentration. I cannot give those years back to my son, but perhaps I can give something different to my granddaughter. Grace felt her throat tighten. That's all any of us can do, sir. Learn and do better. Ooh. The nursery door opened and Nadia entered carrying a tray with tea and Arabic coffee. Over the past weeks, she'd made it a habit to join these morning sessions, learning alongside her father-in-law how to care for her daughter without fear. The change in Nadia had been the most dramatic. The terrified, grief-stricken woman Grace had first met had gradually given way to someone stronger, more confident. She'd started therapy, something Abdullah had initially scoffed at, but now grudgingly respected after seeing the results. How is she this morning? Nadia asked, setting down the tray and reaching for her daughter. Perfect, Abdullah said, transferring Amara to her mother with newly practiced ease. She took her full bottle, no fussing. Grace says she might be ready to start rice cereal soon. Next week, Grace confirmed. We'll start slow, just a taste at first. See how her system handles it. Nadia settled into the rocking chair, Amara content in her arms. I spoke to Dr. Harrison yesterday. He wants to do a feature article about Amara's recovery for a pediatric journal. He's calling it unprecedented. What did you tell him? Grace asked. That he could write about the medical aspects, but that the real story... Nadia looked at Grace meaningfully. The real story is about trusting the right people, even when they're not who you expected. Abdullah made a sound that might have been agreement. He'd mellowed considerably, but he still struggled with openly crediting Grace. Pride ran deep. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. Ms. Williams? There's someone here to see you. She's waiting in the service entrance. Grace frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Did she give a name? Maya Williams. She says she's your daughter. Grace's heart leapt. Maya? She's supposed to be in class. She stopped, worry flooding through her. Is she all right? She seems fine. Excited, actually. Grace excused herself and hurried downstairs, her mind racing through possibilities. Had something happened at school? Was she in some kind of trouble? But when Grace reached the service entrance, Maya was standing there with the biggest smile Grace had seen in months. Her daughter, tall, beautiful, radiating health and happiness, held up her phone triumphantly. Mama, I got it. I got the scholarship. Grace felt her knees go weak. The nursing scholarship? The full ride to UCLA? Full ride, Mama. Tuition, books, housing, everything. Maya launched herself into Grace's arms, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. I couldn't wait to tell you. I drove straight here from campus. They announced it this morning and I had to see your face. Grace held her daughter, this brilliant young woman she'd raised alone, who'd overcome every obstacle life had thrown at them, and felt pride surge through her so powerfully it was almost painful. I'm so proud of you, baby. So incredibly proud. I couldn't have done it without you, Maya said, pulling back to look at her mother. Working those extra shifts, sending money when I needed books, believing in me even when... Always, Grace interrupted. I will always believe in you. They stood there in the service entrance, holding each other. Two black women who'd fought their way up from nothing, who'd refuse to let the world define their worth or limit their potential. "Can I meet them?" Maya asked suddenly. "The family you've been telling me about? The baby you saved?" Grace hesitated. This was crossing a line she'd maintained for 20 years, keeping her personal life separate from her work life, never letting the families she worked for meet her daughter. It was safer that way, cleaner. Less chance of her being seen as anything other than the help. But things were different here. This family was different. "Let me ask," Grace said. She led Maya upstairs, her daughter's eyes widening as they moved through the mansion's opulent halls. Grace had described the house in their phone calls, but seeing it was different. "Mama," Maya whispered, "this is insane. You work here?" "I work here," Grace confirmed, stopping outside the nursery. "Wait here a moment." She stepped inside where Nadia and Abdullah were still with Amara. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but my daughter Maya is here. She got a full scholarship to UCLA's nursing program, we just found out. She wanted to meet the family, but if this is a bad time, bring her in," Nadia said immediately. "Grace, this is wonderful news. We'd love to meet her." Even Abdullah nodded. "Yes, a full scholarship. That's a significant achievement." Grace returned to the hallway and beckoned Maya inside. Her daughter entered hesitantly, her natural confidence tempered by the unfamiliar environment and the obvious wealth surrounding her. "Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore, this is my daughter, Maya." Nadia stood, still holding Amara, and crossed to Maya with genuine warmth. "It's so lovely to meet you, Maya. Your mother talks about you constantly. Congratulations on your scholarship." "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore, and thank you for—" Maya glanced at her mother, then continued, "for giving my mom a chance here. I know she's been happy working for your family." Abdullah approached, extending his hand formally. "Ms. Williams, your mother has been invaluable to this household. You should be very proud of her." Maya shook his hand, her nursing student instincts kicking in as she noticed Amara. "Is this the baby? Oh, she's beautiful. Would you like to hold her?" Nadia offered. Maya's face lit up. "Really? I mean, yes, I'd love to." As Nadia transferred Amara to Maya's arms, Grace watched her daughter's professional training take over. Maya automatically supported the baby's head, adjusted her position for optimal comfort, checked her color and responsiveness with practiced ease. "She looks so healthy," Maya said softly. "Mama told me she was really sick. You'd never know it now." "That's because of your mother," Nadia said, her voice thick with emotion. "She saved Amara's life when no one else could." Maya looked at Grace with shining eyes. "That's my mama. She's been saving lives her whole life. She just usually doesn't get credit for it." The words hung in the air, a truth so simple and profound that everyone in the room felt its weight. Abdullah cleared his throat roughly. "Ms. Williams, Maya, your mother mentioned you'll be studying nursing at UCLA. That's a prestigious program." "Yes, sir, I want to specialize in pediatric oncology. I saw too many kids suffer when I was volunteering at the children's hospital. I want to help them." "A noble calling," Abdullah said, and Grace could see him reassessing, the way he'd been reassessing so many things lately. The medical field needs more people who genuinely care, not just those seeking prestige. That's what Mama always taught me, that the work matters more than the recognition. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. This moment, her daughter holding this family's baby, being respected and valued, her achievements celebrated. It felt like vindication for every difficult year, every sacrifice, every time she'd been invisible. Khalid arrived then, having been in a business call in his office. He stopped short seeing Maya with Amara, then smiled. "I'm guessing this is the famous Maya we've heard so much about?" "Dad, this is Grace's daughter," Nadia said. "She just got a full scholarship to UCLA." Khalid's face brightened. "That's incredible. Congratulations." He approached Grace directly. "Ms. Williams, you must be beyond proud." "I am, sir, thank you." "Actually," Khalid said, an idea clearly forming, "this gives me an opportunity to discuss something we've been meaning to address. Father, Nadia, and I have been talking. Grace, we'd like to offer you a different position in this household." Grace felt her stomach tighten. "Sir?" "Not a different position," Nadia corrected. "An official position, as Amara's nanny, with appropriate salary, benefits, and—" she glanced at Abdullah, who nodded, "and a college fund contribution for Maya." Grace's breath caught. I don't understand." Abdullah stepped forward. "Ms. Williams, you've proven yourself essential to this family. My granddaughter thrives under your care. It would be foolish to continue treating you as household staff when you're clearly much more. We're offering you a formal nanny contract." competitive salary, health insurance, and a contribution to Maya's education expenses. Grace couldn't speak. The magnitude of what they were offering. It wasn't just money, though, that mattered desperately. It was recognition, respect, value. Maya's eyes were wide. "Mama?" Grace found her voice. That's incredibly generous. But I need to understand. This isn't charity." "It's not charity," Khalid said firmly. "It's compensation for the value you bring. Amara needs you. We all do. And frankly, knowing that Maya's education is secure means you can focus on Amara without financial stress. Everyone benefits. Think about it," Nadia added gently. "You don't have to answer now, but Grace, you've given us so much, let us give something back." Grace looked at her daughter, at this baby she'd saved, at this family that had somehow become her family. She thought of her grandmother, who'd scrubbed floors and raised children, and never once received recognition for the lives she'd touched. "Grandma would tell me to negotiate," Grace said finally, a small smile breaking through her tears. Khalid laughed. "Then negotiate. What do you need?" 2 weeks off at Christmas to spend with Maya. Done. And Sundays. I need Sundays for church and rest. Absolutely. And, Grace paused, gathering courage, and the respect that comes with this position, not just from you but from everyone. No more the help or the maid. If I'm Amara's nanny, I'm her nanny. Fully. Abdullah met her eyes and she saw understanding there. "You have my word, Ms. Williams. And more than that, you have my respect. You've earned it." Maya was crying now, still holding Amara, who seemed utterly content despite the emotional chaos around her. "Mama, say yes, please say yes." Grace looked around the nursery, at this family that had been broken and was now healing, at her daughter holding a future she'd fought so hard to secure, at the baby who'd brought them all together. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I accept." The room erupted in smiles and tears. Nadia hugged Grace. Khalid shook her hand formally, and even Abdullah nodded with something that looked almost like pride. "There is one condition," Abdullah said, his tone serious enough that everyone paused. Then his face cracked into something resembling a smile. "You must teach me the rest of that spiritual. I've only learned the first verse." Grace laughed, the sound bursting out of her with pure joy. "Deal, Mr. Whitmore, deal." As Maya handed Amara back to her mother, the baby looked around at all the faces surrounding her, her parents, her grandfather, Grace and Maya, and smiled. Not a reflexive smile, but a genuine expression of contentment and security. "She knows," Maya said softly. "She knows she's loved." Grace put her arm around her daughter, looked at this family she'd saved and who'd saved her right back, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of survival, but the confident hope of someone who'd found their place in the world. Someone who'd proven that worth wasn't determined by skin color or bank account or pedigree, but by the simple act of showing up with compassion when it mattered most. "She knows," Grace agreed. "And that's all any child needs." Outside, the California sun continued its arc across the sky, indifferent to the transformation happening inside the mansion. But in that nursery, something miraculous had occurred. Not a medical miracle, though Amara's recovery had been remarkable. No, the real miracle was simpler and more profound. People had chosen to see each other's humanity instead of their differences, to value character over credentials, to let love triumph over prejudice. And in a world that often felt divided and broken, that was perhaps the greatest miracle of all. 6 months later, the Whitmore estate was unrecognizable, not in its physical appearance but in its atmosphere. The oppressive tension that had once saturated every room had lifted, replaced by something lighter, something that sounded remarkably like laughter. Grace stood in the nursery, now officially her domain, watching as 11-month-old Amara pulled herself up on the furniture, determined to take her first independent steps. The baby had her father's determination and her mother's stubbornness, a combination that promised both triumph and trouble in equal measure. "Come on, sweet girl," Grace encouraged, holding out her hands. "You can do it." Amara let go of the chair, wobbled for a heart-stopping moment, then took one lurching step forward before tumbling onto her well-padded bottom. Instead of crying, she laughed, a sound of pure delight that never failed to make Grace's heart swell. "Almost," Grace said, scooping her up. "You're so close." The nursery door opened and Maya entered, home for winter break from UCLA. She'd completed her first semester with a 4.0 GPA and had already been selected for an advanced pediatric rotation. Grace couldn't have been prouder. "How's our girl?" Maya asked, dropping her backpack and reaching for Amara, who squealed with recognition and lunged toward her. Stubborn as ever, Grace replied with a smile. She's determined to walk before her first birthday next week. She'll do it, Maya said confidently, settling into the rocking chair with Amara. This kid doesn't know the meaning of quit. Grace watched her daughter with the baby, seeing the natural ease between them. Maya had become a fixture in the household over the past months, visiting whenever school allowed, helping with Amara's care, and forming an unexpected friendship with Nadia, who'd become something of a mentor to her. "Mom," Maya said, using the tone that meant something serious was coming. "I need to talk to you about something." Grace felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, it's—" Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. "Dr. Chen at UCLA, the one heading the pediatric oncology department? She asked me to join a research study. It's a huge opportunity, but it means staying in LA this summer instead of coming home." Grace felt the words hit her chest, even though she'd known this moment would come eventually. Her daughter, spreading her wings, building a life beyond Grace's orbit. "That's wonderful, baby," Grace said, meaning it despite the ache. "You should absolutely do it." "You're not upset?" "I'm proud. There's a difference." Grace sat in the chair across from Maya. "You're building your future, exactly like you should be. That's what all this has been for, so you could have opportunities I never had." Maya's eyes glistened. "I feel guilty sometimes. You work so hard, sacrifice so much, and now I'm off living this amazing life while you're still what? Still taking care of a child I love, in a household that respects me, with a salary that means I can breathe for the first time in 20 years? Grace shook her head. "Maya, I'm exactly where I want to be. Don't confuse my choices with limitations." Before Maya could respond, Khalid appeared in the doorway, his expression unusually serious. "Grace, could I speak with you? In my office?" Grace's stomach tightened. In 6 months, he'd never summoned her to his office. Discussions about Amara happened in the nursery. Schedule changes were handled through Mrs. Chen. This felt formal, official. "Of course, sir." Maya gave her a questioning look, but Grace just smiled reassuringly and followed Khalid downstairs. His office was masculine and imposing. Dark wood, leather furniture, walls lined with books and certificates documenting his business achievements. Nadia was already there, sitting in one of the chairs facing his desk. Abdullah was present too, standing by the window. Grace's anxiety spiked. "Is something wrong with Amara? Did Dr. Harrison?" "Amara's fine," Nadia said quickly, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please sit. This is about something else." Grace sat, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. She'd learned in her years of service that sometimes the best response was patient silence. Khalid settled into his chair while Abdullah remained standing, a position of authority he seemed most comfortable with. "Grace," Khalid began, "in the 6 months since you officially became Amara's nanny, our household has transformed. Our daughter is thriving, healthy, happy, hitting every developmental milestone. But more than that, our family has healed. Nadia's anxiety has decreased dramatically. My relationship with my father has deepened, and He paused, his voice catching slightly. "I've learned what it means to be truly present with my daughter. You've been a catalyst for profound change," Abdullah added, his formal tone unable to mask genuine emotion. "You've taught this family things we desperately needed to learn." Grace felt her throat tighten. "I'm grateful to have been here for it. Which brings us to why we've called you here," Nadia said, leaning forward. "Grace, Khalid's business is expanding. He's opening a new office in Riyadh and will need to spend significant time there, possibly 6 months out of the year." Grace's heart sank. She understood what was coming. They'd need a nanny in Riyadh, someone local, someone who understood the culture better. This was the end. "We want you to come with us," Khalid said. Grace's head snapped up. "What?" "To Saudi Arabia," Nadia clarified. "As Amara's nanny. We'd provide housing, travel expenses, everything you'd need. Maya could visit during her breaks, and when we're in the States, you'd return here with us." Grace couldn't process what she was hearing. "You want me to move to Saudi Arabia?" "Part-time," Khalid corrected. 6 months here, 6 months there. Amara needs consistency, and you are her consistency. Taking her away from you would undo everything we've built." Abdullah stepped forward. "Ms. Williams, I won't pretend this will be without challenges. Saudi society is different from what you're accustomed to. There will be cultural adjustments, expectations you'll need to navigate." But he paused, and Grace saw genuine conviction in his eyes. "I believe you're capable of handling it. More than that, I believe my granddaughter needs you more than she needs any cultural comfort. Grace felt like the floor had tilted beneath her. Move to Saudi Arabia? Leave everything familiar? Navigate a completely foreign culture where her race, her gender, her religion would make her stand out even more than she did here? I need time to think about this, she said carefully. Of course, Nadia said quickly. Take all the time you need. We don't leave for 3 months, but Grace, I want you to understand something. This isn't just about Amara. You've become family. I can't imagine raising my daughter without you. The word hung in the air. Family. Grace had heard it before from employers, usually when they wanted something, a manipulation disguised as affection. But this felt different. These people had proven over 6 months that they meant it. May I be excused? Grace asked quietly. I need to process this. Absolutely, Khalid said. And Grace, whatever you decide, your position here is secure. We're not pressuring you. Grace nodded and left the office, her mind spinning. She found herself walking to the garden, the one place on the estate where she could think clearly. She sat on a bench near the fountain, watching water cascade over imported Italian marble, and pulled out her phone. She needed to talk to the one person whose opinion mattered most. Maya answered on the second ring. Mom, what happened? Grace explained everything. The offer, the implications, the opportunity, and the risk. When she finished, silence stretched between them. Finally, Maya spoke. Mom, what do you want to do? I don't know. This is so far outside anything I've ever considered. No, I mean, forget the logistics for a second. When they asked you, what was your first feeling? Before the fear kicked in? Grace closed her eyes, reaching for that initial response before her practical mind had taken over. Excitement, she admitted, and terror, but mostly excitement. Then you know your answer. Maya, this would mean being even farther from you. Mom, I'm 20 years old. I'm building my own life. You've spent 2 decades putting me first. Maybe it's time to do something for yourself, something adventurous. It's not about me. It's about Amara. Is it? Maya challenged gently. Or is it about you finally admitting that you deserve this? That you're not just the help, but someone valuable enough to be essential to this family? Grace felt tears slip down her cheeks. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. Maya's voice softened. Mama, you've spent your whole life being invisible, making yourself smaller so other people could be comfortable. This family sees you, really sees you. Don't run from that because it scares you. After they hung up, Grace sat in the garden for another hour, wrestling with fear and possibility. She thought of her grandmother, who'd never traveled more than 50 miles from where she was born. She thought of her mother, who'd taught until the day she died, never getting to see the world she taught about in her geography classes. And she thought of Amara, bright, stubborn, beautiful Amara, who needed consistency and love more than she needed cultural purity or familiar surroundings. Grace made her decision. 3 months later, Grace stood in the Riyadh airport, jet-lagged and overwhelmed. The heat hit her like a physical force as they exited the air-conditioned terminal. Nadia, covered in an elegant abaya, squeezed her hand. I know it's a lot, Nadia said gently, but you'll adjust. We all will. The family had rented a compound in an expatriate neighborhood, not as opulent as the Beverly Hills mansion, but comfortable and secure. Grace's quarters were spacious and private with everything she needed. But it was the cultural adjustment that proved most challenging. She couldn't drive. Women had only recently been allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia, and navigating the process as a foreign worker was complex. She needed male escort for certain activities. Her dress code was strictly monitored, and everywhere she went she felt eyes on her. Curious, sometimes hostile, occasionally kind. The first month was brutal. Grace questioned her decision daily, missed Maya desperately, felt isolated in ways she'd never experienced. Even in the household, some of the local staff treated her with suspicion or disdain. But Amara was her anchor. The baby had taken her first steps the week before they left California, and now she was toddling everywhere, chattering in a mix of English and Arabic that delighted Abdullah. Grace spent her days teaching Amara, playing with her, maintaining the routines that kept the child secure and thriving. And slowly, something unexpected happened. The local staff began to soften. They saw Grace's dedication, her respectful attempts to learn basic Arabic, her genuine love for Amara. The compound's other nannies, women from the Philippines, Indonesia, Kenya, reached out, forming a support network of women far from home, caring for other people's children. Abdullah, who Grace had worried might revert to his old prejudices on his home turf, Instead became her fiercest advocate. When a family friend made a disparaging comment about the black help, Abdullah had shut it down immediately. That woman saved my granddaughter's life. Show respect or leave my home. Nadia helped Grace navigate the social complexities, taught her which rules were inflexible and which had gray areas. Khalid ensured she had everything she needed, never making her feel like an imposition. And when Maya visited during her spring break, bringing energy and laughter and stories from UCLA, Grace realized something profound. She wasn't trapped here. She was choosing to be here, and that made all the difference. One evening, 6 months into their Riyadh stay, Grace was putting Amara to bed when the toddler wrapped her arms around Grace's neck and said, "Gace, love Gace." It was the first time Amara had articulated the sentiment so clearly. Grace felt her heart might burst. "I love you too, sweet girl. So much." Amara pulled back, her dark eyes serious. "Mama?" Grace's breath caught. She'd worked so hard to ensure Amara understood who her mother was, never wanting to overstep boundaries. "No, baby. Nadia is Mama. I'm Grace." But Amara shook her head stubbornly, pointing at Grace. "Mama, Grace." Grace heard a sound from the doorway and looked up to find Nadia standing there, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," Grace said immediately. "I'll correct her." "Don't," Nadia interrupted, entering the room. "Grace, you are her mama. Maybe not the one who gave birth to her, but the one who brought her back to life. The one who's been there every single day, teaching her, loving her, keeping her safe." She sat on the bed beside them. "I'm her mother and I always will be. But you're her mama too. There's room for both of us." Grace couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Nadia continued, "In many cultures, children have multiple maternal figures. My own mother had her biological mother and her milk mother, the woman who nursed her when my grandmother couldn't. Both were essential. Both were loved." She reached out, taking Grace's hand. "Amara is blessed to have two women who would move mountains for her. Let's not diminish that by worrying about titles." That night, after Amara was asleep and Nadia had returned to her own quarters, Grace sat by the window watching the Riyadh skyline. So different from Beverly Hills, yet feeling increasingly like home. She texted Maya, "Amara called me Mama Grace today." Maya's response was immediate. "Because that's what you are. How does it feel?" Grace thought about the question. How did it feel to be acknowledged, to be seen, to matter not just as an employee but as an essential part of a child's life? "It feels like everything I've worked for finally means something," she typed back. "It always meant something, Mama. You're just finally letting yourself see it." 1 year later, the Whitmore family gathered in Beverly Hills for Amara's second birthday. The party was small, just family, and the household staff who'd become part of their extended family. Maya was there, now in her 3rd year at UCLA and thriving. Mrs. Chen had made a spectacular cake. Even Abdullah, who'd initially scoffed at American birthday excess, had gotten caught up in the celebration, insisting on the finest decorations. Grace stood back, watching Amara toddle between her parents, her grandfather Maya, and the gathered loved ones. The child was radiant, healthy, happy, secure in the knowledge that she was cherished. "Mama Grace," Amara called, spotting her. "Cake." Grace laughed and joined the group, allowing Amara to pull her into the circle. As they sang "Happy Birthday" in both English and Arabic, Grace looked around at these faces that had become her family. Khalid, who'd learned to prioritize presence over productivity. Nadia, who'd transformed from a terrified mother into a confident woman. Abdullah, who'd confronted his prejudices and chosen love over pride. Maya, building a future that honored everything Grace had sacrificed. And Amara, beautiful, stubborn, brilliant Amara, who'd brought them all together. After the cake was served and Amara was covered in frosting, Abdullah stood to make a toast. The room quieted. 2 years ago, he began, his English still heavily accented but clear. "My granddaughter nearly died. The finest doctors in the world could not save her. But one woman, a woman we almost dismissed, a woman some said did not belong in our household. She saw what we could not see. She understood what we failed to understand." He looked directly at Grace. "Ms. Williams, you saved more than a child's life. You saved this family. You taught us that worth has nothing to do with wealth or status or skin color, that compassion and competence matter more than credentials, that sometimes the most important people are the ones we're most tempted to overlook." He raised his glass. "To Grace Williams, a woman of extraordinary strength, wisdom, and heart. To Mama Grace." The room echoed. "To Mama Grace." Grace felt tears stream down her face as everyone drank to the toast. Maya hugged her from one side, Nadia from the other. Even Khalid crossed the room to shake her hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. And Amara, understanding something important was happening even if she couldn't articulate it, climbed into Grace's lap and rested her frosting-covered face against Grace's chest. "Love, Mama Grace," the toddler declared to the room. "We all do, sweetheart," Nadia said softly. "We all do." As the party continued around them, Grace held Amara close and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From invisible maid to essential family member, from Atlanta, poverty, to Beverly Hills and Riyadh, from surviving to thriving. Her grandmother had been right. God didn't put her on this earth to be invisible. He'd put her here to love fiercely, to show up courageously, to prove that humanity transcends every boundary people try to build. And Grace Williams had done exactly that. She'd saved a baby's life. She'd changed a family's heart. And in the process, she'd claimed her own worth. Not because someone finally saw her, but because she'd finally allowed herself to be seen. "What are you thinking about?" Maya whispered, leaning close. Grace looked at her daughter, at this family, at the life she'd built from scraps and determination and unwavering love. "I'm thinking," Grace said, smiling through her tears, "that sometimes the most important thing you can do is exactly what everyone says you can't, and that the truest family isn't always the one you're born into. It's the one you choose to love, even when it's complicated, even when it's hard, even when the world says you don't belong." Maya kissed her mother's cheek. "You've always belonged, Mama. You just needed to find people who recognized it." And as Amara fell asleep in Grace's arms, surrounded by the people who loved them both, Grace Williams finally believed it. She belonged. She mattered. She was home.